The dim lights of Murphy's bar flickered like distant stars over the San Diego Naval Base, casting long shadows across worn wooden tables etched with the ghosts of 1,000 military tales. It was a Friday night, the kind where the air hummed with the low buzz of camaraderie and the sharp tang of spilled beer mixed with the salty breeze from the nearby ocean. Patrons clustered in groups, veterans nursing their whiskeys, young recruits boasting about basic training, and a few civilians caught in the orbit of this testosterone-fueled universe. Murphy's wasn't just a bar. It was a sanctuary for those who had stared down danger. A place where stories of heroism and heartbreak flowed as freely as the drinks. But tonight, the atmosphere carried an undercurrent of something sharper, something unspoken, like the calm before a storm rolls in from the Pacific. In the far corner, away from the raucous laughter at the pool tables, sat Aisha Thompson. At 35, she carried herself with the quiet poise of someone who had seen worlds beyond the bar's four walls. Her skin, a rich mahogany, glowed under the soft lamplight, and her dark curls were pulled back in a practical ponytail that spoke of efficiency rather than vanity. She wore a simple black shirt, sleeves rolled halfway up her forearms, revealing just a glimpse of intricate ink, an eagle with outstretched wings, detailed with symbols that seemed to whisper secrets. Aisha stirred her whiskey slowly, watching the ice cubes clink against the glass like tiny bells tolling warnings. She wasn't here to socialize. She was here to remember, to let the familiar hum of military chatter wash over her like an old friend. 15 years in the shadows of classified operations had taught her the value of silence, of observing before acting. But even in retirement, the past clung to her like the tattoo on her skin. Across the room, a group of SEAL operators dominated a central table, their broad shoulders and buzz cuts marking them as the alphas of the evening. Leading the pack was Lieutenant Derek Hayes, 28, with a jawline sharp enough to cut glass and eyes that scanned the room like a predator assessing prey. He'd been in the SEALs for 6 years, surviving hell weeks and deployments that had hardened him into a machine of efficiency and ego. Beside him sat his buddy, Sergeant Malik Ruiz, equally cocky but with a laugh that could disarm or provoke. They were fresh off a training exercise, adrenaline still pumping through their veins, turning every conversation into a competition. "Hey barkeep, another round?" Hayes bellowed, his voice cutting through the din like a command on the battlefield. The other SEALs chuckled, slapping backs and toasting to their unbreakable bond. They were the elite, the ones who dove into the abyss and emerged victorious, and in places like Murphy's, they ruled unchallenged. As the night deepened, the bar's energy shifted subtly. Aisha's presence, solitary and serene, began to draw idle glances. She wasn't flashy, no medals pinned to her chest or stories shouted for applause, but there was an aura about her, an invisible shield of experience that made the air around her feel heavier. The veterans at the bar counter nodded knowingly. They recognized the look of someone who had carried burdens too classified to share. But the younger crowd, like Hayes and Ruiz, saw only an outsider, a black woman sipping alone in a sea of uniforms. Little did they know, her tattoo wasn't just art. It was a map of missions that had shaped nations, a symbol etched in blood and secrecy. The stage was set for a collision of worlds, where arrogance would meet its match, and a simple roll of a sleeve would unravel everything they thought they knew about strength and service. The ice in Aisha's glass melted further, mirroring the slow thaw of patience in the room, as the first sparks of confrontation loomed on the horizon. Hayes leaned back in his chair, beer bottle dangling from his fingers, his eyes catching the faint outline of Aisha's tattoo across the room. "Yo, Ruiz, check it out," he said, nudging his friend with a smirk. "That lady's got some ink." "What's that supposed to be, some wannabe military tat?" Ruiz squinted, his grin widening as he took in the eagle design. "Man, that's gotta be one of those fake tattoos you get to impress the boys at the bar. No way she's got any real service under her belt." The table erupted in laughter, the sound sharp and cutting, drawing eyes from nearby patrons. Hayes and Ruiz had grown up in the SEAL's crucible, where respect was earned through blood, sweat, and proven missions. To them, Aisha was an anomaly, a civilian in their domain, her presence almost an affront to their hard-won status. Hayes, the son of a Navy mechanic, had clawed his way into the SEALs through sheer grit, his pride forged in the deserts of Iraq and the jungles of South America. Ruiz, a first-generation American from a Puerto Rican family, wore his SEAL trident like a badge of defiance against anyone who doubted him. Together they were a force, their camaraderie built on shared trials and an unspoken belief that they were untouchable. Tonight, the alcohol loosened their tongues, and the bar's audience fueled their bravado. "Hey lady," Hayes called out, loud enough for heads to turn. "What's with the tattoo? You trying to pass as one of us?" His tone dripped with condescension. A challenge wrapped in a joke. The bar quieted slightly, patrons sensing the shift from playful banter to something sharper. Aisha didn't flinch. She took a slow sip of her whiskey, her eyes fixed on the amber liquid as if the noise around her was irrelevant. Her silence only goaded Hayes further. "I'm serious," he pressed, leaning forward. "What unit's that supposed to be? I've seen every insignia from here to Kabul, and that eagle ain't one of 'em." Ruiz chimed in, his voice mock curious. "Yeah, what's the story? You get that at a mall kiosk or what?" Their laughter rang out again, but Aisha's calm was unshaken. She set her glass down, her movements deliberate, and turned slightly to face them. Her eyes, dark and piercing, locked onto Hayes, and for a fleeting moment, his smirk faltered. There was something in her gaze, steady, unyielding, that didn't match the civilian they'd pegged her for. "I heard you the first time," Aisha said, her voice low but clear, cutting through the bar's hum like a blade. "You want to know about my tattoo? Maybe you should ask better questions." Her words were measured, almost gentle, but they carried a weight that made Ruiz shift uncomfortably in his seat. Hayes, however, was too deep in his bravado to notice. "Better questions? How about this? Did you serve, or is that ink just for show?" The bar grew quieter still, the tension palpable now. Veterans at the counter exchanged glances, their faces unreadable but attentive. They knew the look of someone who'd been tested in ways these young operators couldn't imagine. Aisha's lips curved into the faintest of smiles. Not amusement, but something colder, like a chess player watching an opponent make a fatal move. She rolled her sleeve up slightly higher, revealing more of the eagle's intricate details, feathers etched with tiny symbols, a design too precise to be decorative. "You sure you want to go down this road?" she asked, her tone a warning wrapped in velvet. Hayes laughed, but it was hollow, and the first seeds of doubt began to sprout in his mind. Hayes stood, his chair scraping against the floor, emboldened by the crowd and the beer in his veins. He sauntered toward Aisha's corner, Ruiz trailing behind, both of them feeding off the attention of the bar. "Come on, sweetheart," Hayes said, planting himself a few feet from her stool. "You're dodging the question. What's the deal with that tattoo? You claiming you served in some elite unit we've never heard of?" His voice was loud, performative, drawing chuckles from his table and curious stares from others. Aisha remained seated, her posture relaxed, but her eyes tracking every movement, every exit, every potential threat, an old habit from years in hostile territories. She didn't respond immediately, letting the silence stretch, her gaze pinning Hayes like a specimen under glass. "I'm not claiming anything," Aisha said finally, her voice steady as granite. "But since you're so curious, why don't you tell me what you think it means?" The challenge hung in the air, flipping the script. Ruiz laughed, trying to keep the mood light, but his eyes darted nervously to Hayes. "Oh, she's got some fire," Ruiz said, elbowing his friend. "Bet she's gonna say she was in some secret squirrel unit, right? Like Black Ops or something?" The mockery was clear, but Aisha's expression didn't waver. She leaned forward slightly, her sleeve shifting to reveal more of the tattoo, symbols that looked vaguely familiar to Hayes, though he couldn't place them. "You think I didn't serve?" she asked, her tone deceptively calm. "You think this is just some decoration I picked up to impress guys like you?" Hayes crossed his arms, his confidence wavering but his pride holding firm. "Look, no offense, but I know every unit worth knowing. 6 years as a SEAL, seen action in places you can't even spell. That tattoo? Never seen it. Probably some knockoff you gotta feel tough." The bar was nearly silent now, the clink of glasses and murmur of conversations fading as patrons leaned in. An older man with a Navy veteran's cap watched from the counter, his eyes narrowing as if he recognized something the SEALs didn't. Aisha's smile returned, sharper this time. 6 years, she repeated, almost to herself. "And you think that's enough to know everything?" Ruiz stepped forward, trying to back his friend. "Lady, we're not trying to be jerks, but you're not giving us much to work with. If you served, where? Army? Navy? Desk job? What?" His tone was less aggressive than Hayes's, but the condescension was still there. Aisha tilted her head, assessing them both. "You want details?" she asked. "Fine. That eagle has 13 feathers, 1 for each original colony. The wings are angled for active combat status. The symbols around it? They mark missions in places you'll never find on a map." Her words were precise, delivered with the cadence of someone who'd memorized far more than internet trivia. Hayes blinked, caught off guard, but recovered quickly. "Nice try," he said. "Anyone can read up on that stuff online. Doesn't prove a thing." The bar's atmosphere thickened, the tension coiling like a spring. Aisha took another sip of her whiskey, her movements slow, deliberate. "You're right," she said. "Words don't prove anything, but evidence does." She reached into her pocket, pulling out a small faded photo and placing it on the counter. The image showed 5 operatives in unfamiliar uniforms, standing in what looked like a desert outpost. Aisha, younger but unmistakable, stood at the center, her eyes as intense then as they were now. "Afghanistan, 2009, she said. "Officially, we were never there. Officially, that gear doesn't exist." Hayes stared at the photo, his bravado cracking as he recognized technology far beyond standard issue. The bar patrons leaned closer, sensing the shift. The old veteran at the counter muttered something to his friend, his face grim. Hayes felt the first stirrings of unease, but his pride wouldn't let him back down. "Nice Photoshop," he said, his voice less steady. Aisha's eyes locked onto his, and for the first time, he felt like the one being hunted. As Hayes's words hung in the air, Aisha's mind drifted, the bar fading into a haze of memory. The tattoo on her arm seemed to pulse, each line a tether to a past she'd buried but never escaped. She was 22 again, crouched in the arid darkness of an Afghan mountain pass, her breath shallow to avoid detection. The eagle design wasn't on her skin then. It was a patch on her uniform, a symbol of a unit that didn't exist in any official record. Her team, 5 shadows moving as one, had been tasked with neutralizing a warlord whose name never made the news. The mission was above black, so classified that even their handlers spoke in code. Aisha's role was infiltration. Her ability to blend into crowds, to become invisible in plain sight, made her the perfect weapon. The eagle's feathers, 13 in number, were a nod to the unit's founding principles: liberty, sacrifice, and secrecy. The memory shifted to a humid night in Somalia. 2011, Aisha, now a team leader, navigated a crowded market, her face obscured by a scarf, her eyes scanning for a high-value target. The eagle patch was gone, replaced by the tattoo etched into her skin after her first mission's success. Each symbol around the eagle marked a completed op. 5 in total, each one a miracle of precision and survival. She remembered the weight of her silenced rifle, the heartbeat of her target as she closed in, the silent nod from her mentor, General Marcus Tate, watching from a distance. Tate, a grizzled veteran with eyes like steel, had seen her potential when others dismissed her. His own arm bore a similar tattoo, a bond forged in the crucible of missions that changed the world's undercurrents without a single headline. Back in the bar, Aisha's eyes refocused, the memories receding but leaving a fire in her chest. She looked at Hayes, his smug grin a pale echo of the officers who'd once doubted her at the start of her career. She'd been underestimated then too, a young black woman in a world of grizzled men, her intelligence and skill dismissed until she proved herself in blood. The tattoo wasn't just ink. It was her defiance, her proof of survival in places where failure meant erasure. She leaned forward, her voice low but resonant. "You think I'm making this up?" she asked Hayes. "You think I'd carry this mark for fun?" Her sleeve was fully rolled up now, the eagle's details stark under the bar's light, symbols that hinted at operations so covert they were myths even among the elite. Hayes shifted, his confidence fraying. The photo still sat on the counter, its edges worn but its details undeniable. The gear, the setting, the intensity in the operative's eyes. It wasn't something you could fake with a few clicks. Ruiz, quieter now, leaned in to study the image. "What unit is this?" he asked, his bravado replaced by genuine curiosity. Aisha's smile was thin, almost pitying. "One you'll never read about," she said. "One that doesn't exist on paper." The bar was a vacuum of sound now, every patron hanging on her words. The old veteran at the counter nodded slowly, as if confirming a suspicion. Aisha's mind flickered to another memory. Her last mission, 2015, a jungle op where she'd saved Tate's life, earning his eternal respect. His tattoo, identical to hers, was a mark of their shared oath, to serve in silence, to protect without glory. She wondered if he'd walk through that door tonight, his sleeve rolled up to shut these boys down for good. Aisha's fingers moved to her pocket, pulling out her phone with the same precision she'd once used to assemble a rifle in the dark. She tapped the screen, her expression unreadable, as Hayes and Ruiz exchanged uneasy glances. "You want proof?" she asked, her voice a quiet challenge. "Let's see how far your curiosity takes you." She dialed a number, her eyes never leaving Hayes, who was starting to sweat despite the bar's cool air. The photo on the counter seemed to loom larger, its implications sinking in. Hayes tried to laugh it off. "What, you calling your buddy to back up your story?" he said, but his voice cracked, betraying his nerves. Ruiz nudged him, whispering, "Man, maybe we should chill. Something's off here." The phone connected, and Aisha spoke softly, her words inaudible to the bar but carrying a weight that silenced nearby conversations. She hung up, then pulled out a second device, a burner phone, sleek and untraceable, the kind used in ops where traceability meant death. She typed rapidly, sending messages to contacts Hayes could only guess at. The bar's atmosphere was electric now, patrons whispering, the old veteran muttering about ghost units to his friend. Aisha slid the photo back into her pocket, her movements deliberate. "You asked about my service," she said. "You're about to get answers. But be careful what you wish for." Hayes's phone buzzed, startling him. He glanced at the screen, a message from an unknown number. "Stand down. You're out of your depth." His face paled as he showed it to Ruiz, who was now visibly shaken. "How the hell did she get my number?" Ruiz muttered, checking his own phone, which vibrated with a similar message. The bar's energy shifted again, the SEAL's bravado crumbling under the weight of something they couldn't name. Aisha leaned back, sipping her whiskey, her calm a stark contrast to their growing panic. "You think I'm alone here?" she asked. "You think I survived 15 years of operations that don't exist without resources?" The old veteran approached, his voice low but firm. "Boys, you're messing with someone who's been places you'll never go," he said. "I was in Iraq, 03. Heard stories about a woman who could walk into a warlord's den and walk out with his head, no trace. Never saw her, but that tattoo, it matches the whispers." Hayes laughed nervously, trying to regain control. "Stories? Come on, old man, you're buying her act?" But the veteran's eyes were steady, and Hayes felt a chill. Aisha's phone buzzed again, and she glanced at it, her expression shifting to one of quiet anticipation. "You wanted to know who I am," she said. "You're about to find out. But once you do, there's no going back." The bar's door creaked, and every head turned. Heavy footsteps approached, the kind that carried authority without effort. Aisha's eyes flicked toward the entrance, a faint smile playing on her lips. Hayes and Ruiz froze, their instincts screaming that they'd crossed a line they couldn't uncross. The messages on their phones, the veteran's warning, Aisha's unshakable calm, it all pointed to something bigger, something they weren't prepared for. Aisha set her glass down, her voice soft but piercing. "You boys wanted to play soldier," she said. "Now you're about to meet the real thing." The footsteps grew louder, and the bar held its breath, waiting for the storm to break. The bar's air grew thick as the footsteps stopped just outside the door. Hayes and Ruiz stood frozen, their earlier bravado replaced by a creeping dread. The old veteran stepped back, his eyes darting between Aisha and the entrance, as if he knew what was coming. Whispers rippled through the bar, fragments of rumors about ghost operators and missions that never happened. Aisha remained seated, her posture relaxed but her eyes sharp, tracking every movement in the room. She'd been in situations like this before, moments where the balance of power shifted, where arrogance met truth. Her tattoo, now fully visible, seemed to glow under the bar's dim lights, its symbols a silent testament to her past. Hayes's phone buzzed again, another message. "Remain where you are. Consequences pending." He showed it to Ruiz, whose face was now ashen. "Man, what the hell is going on?" Ruiz whispered, his voice barely audible. "Who is she?" Before Hayes could respond, the door swung open, revealing a grizzled man in civilian clothes, but with a presence that screamed military. General Marcus Tate, 55, stepped into Murphy's, his broad frame filling the doorway. His eyes, sharp as a hawk's, scanned the room, landing on Aisha with a nod of recognition. The bar fell silent, the weight of his authority palpable even to those who didn't know his rank. Behind him stood two other officers, their faces stern, their uniforms crisp despite the late hour. Tate's gaze shifted to Hayes and Ruiz, who instinctively straightened, their SEAL training kicking in despite their panic. "Which one of you is Hayes?" Tate's voice was low, controlled, but it carried the force of a command. Hayes raised a hand, his throat dry. "That's me, sir." Tate stepped closer, his boots echoing on the wooden floor. He stopped inches from Hayes, his eyes boring into the younger man's. "You've got some nerve," he said, his tone icy. "Picking a fight with someone whose boots you're not fit to polish." Ruiz tried to speak, but Tate silenced him with a glance. "You too, Sergeant. Save it." Aisha stood, her presence commanding attention as she nodded to Tate. "Good to see you, Marcus," she said, her voice warm but laced with steel. Tate's stern expression softened for a moment, and then, in a move that stunned the bar, he rolled up his sleeve. There, on his forearm, was a tattoo identical to Aisha's, an eagle with 13 feathers, surrounded by the same cryptic symbols. Gasps rippled through the crowd, and Hayes felt his stomach drop. The matching tattoos weren't just a coincidence. They were a badge of a brotherhood forged in shadows, a unit so secret it was a legend even among the elite. "You mocked her tattoo," Tate said, his voice rising just enough to carry. "You mocked a symbol that represents missions you'll never comprehend. Missions that kept this country safe while you were still in high school." The bar was a tomb now, every patron frozen, hanging on his words. The old veteran nodded, as if his suspicions had been confirmed. Hayes tried to speak, but his voice failed him. Ruiz, sweating profusely, muttered, "Sir, we didn't know—" Tate cut him off. "Ignorance isn't an excuse, son. Not when you're wearing that trident." He turned to Aisha, his expression a mix of pride and apology. "Colonel Thompson, I'm sorry you had to deal with this." The word colonel hit Hayes and Ruiz like a sledgehammer, their world tilting as the truth began to dawn.